kid, in school, everywhere. In sport, every kind of sport, right? But everywhere. When somebody does things right and you realize she's doing things right, you say, I'm going to try to figure out what she's doing. I want to do like her. One example I always use is, you're too young, you probably think that people always high jump, always jump backward. You know the way people do the high jump? Salto in alto, the high jump? You know, they go over the bar with their back, right? Okay, go, turns around, flips over with their back. Well, you know that didn't used to be like that. People used to go over the bar with their belly. They would. That's in fact, when I was a kid, that's how they taught me to do the high jump at school. I think it was the Mexico Olympic Games of 1968 that this guy Fosbury, in fact I think it's still called a la Fosbury. If you check, Fosbury was an athlete out, I think, Berkeley or some UCLA, some California campus, in the American team for high jumping, that had figured out this way. Was a big innovator, him and his coach. And I remember I was a kid, I was 12, looking at it, and there was this guy jumping backward, and then we were all laughing. So, he's gonna do, he's gonna hit the pole. And poof, you know, poof, he was. In fact, he won hands down because the technique was so superior that, imagine if he had a way of hiding it or patented it. He would have won the Olympic Games for 3 decades. The guy at 50 would still be jumping higher than the other. Right? And he said, no. 4 years later, everybody was jumping like Fosbury, or almost everybody. I think the Russians were the last one to give in because they were among the best. At the time, I think the world record was a Russian guy. I forgot the name. At the time, I remember that had jumped remarkably higher than the other, you know, in the old style. And Fosbury just blew it off. So, anyhow, it's everywhere, right? So the imitation is pervasive. And if one thinks of economic development, it is actually a matter of imitation. In fact, a recent finding in historical DNA and genetic sequences shows that, contrary to what we thought, that the expansion of agriculture from the Fertile Crescent was a monotone expansion in which farmers, which were in any case imitated, but it would be imitation within the village and across generation, farming people just expanded and wiped out everybody else. No, it wasn't true. There were various waves, and each one mixed with hunter-gatherers, mixed also genetically, that is, they had intercourse to reproduce, and so our actual genetic background is a lot more interesting and complicated and mixed than what we think. And the interesting point is that there was imitation even at that level, that is, hunter-gathering population, by mixing sexually with farmers, eventually adopted farming techniques and so on, and vice versa. There were shepherding, not shepherding, what did I say? Animal raising techniques that were adopted by farmers that also were adopted. So imitation has been there all the time. And imitation is effectively an externality. So if one takes that literally, imitation alone is enough to make you understand that perfect competitive market, we already knew that, but they are impossible. Because a perfect competitive market requires the humans chop off a piece of their brain. The humans renounce imitation, which we cannot, right? It's like, we know, we imitate, period. We imitate spontaneously. It's an automatic mechanism, so, okay? So yes, absolutely. So there is an externality, but it is imitation. I think that the imitation externality is there, and it's profound, it's widespread, it's everywhere, and it's a big instrument to carry growth. But that's not what the literature on externality is. It's not about imitation. If it were about imitation, it would be about network, the construction network, the cost minimizing network, constructing a city with neighbors and areas that are specialized in certain function, if you think, is a way of constructing directed networks. I'm searching for somebody that knows how to chop a steak, to cut an animal. That's why I go to the butchering district. I don't go to the fruit and vegetables shop because they have no knives there. I'm looking for somebody that knows how to sew my shirts and my dress properly. I go where the tailors are, and so on. Right? It's a networking mechanism that reduces transaction cost and points you to the kind of thing you're looking for. And anyhow, so that's my thinking about that. That's why, from a practical point of view, the only way I can think of external effort is in terms of imitation. But then modeling imitation requires modeling networks, exchange of information across network, and investment in replicating others. That's a way to go. It's not the way I've gone, but I think it's a way, interesting way to go to look at development. And if you look at development in areas that have not yet developed, it really works that way. It's it always has this spreading out thing. Look at the way China developed, right? They started out exactly with this special economic areas. They were like seeds of market mechanisms, and they chose them not by chance. Where is that they picked them? They put them in the area that was both traditionally the most market-oriented area, Cantonese area near Hong Kong and Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and so on, and near Taiwan, where they were Chinese capitalists, right? Enemies, but capitalists, in fact. I don't know if you know, but it's very funny, right? You understand that the whole first wave of industrialization in China, in the special economic zone, was all carried out by Taiwanese. At the time, I had a lot of relation with Taiwanese, and Taiwanese entrepreneurs in particular, and they were all flying out, Taipei, Hong Kong, Guangzhou, or Shenzhen, or whatever, with a car or with a flight, to go follow their factories in the middle 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and back. There was no direct flight. You could not fly from Taipei to Shanghai or directly to mainland China. You had to go through Hong Kong, but they are the people that invested first, second the Japanese, and then the rest, the Germans. And it's spread out by imitation. It's spread out around the initial cores progressively. The areas, the same you can see here, right? That the industrialization of Italy is very much territorial dependent. It spreads out from certain cities, from certain areas that were more advanced in the countryside, then to another, then to another. In fact, there are areas where apparently has not arrived yet. And this is true pretty much everywhere, the expansion. And it's a process of imitation. Maybe that has not been modeled. Nice models of the economic geography that takes into account that it's an imitation dynamics the more. A lot of the economic geography that has been produced is that concentrate and assume the cities exist and put the core in the center of the city and has this circular view. Yeah, but the circular view, apart from the fact that it's not always true, okay, because it depends on geography and a variety of things, it's not a given. It's a creation, it's an outcome of the spreading out from the core, the center, to the periphery. It's a spreading out of imitation processes. So, anyhow, but...
I have a question, which is more theoretical. I mean, let's say that is a theoretical one, and I don't know if it's so relevant, but as imitation can lead to positive stuff, like, as you said, distretto industriale in Italy, and in a positive economic environment, in a positive way, do you think that it can be also in a negative way? Like, because I mind the argument of the crisis that spread, so maybe this could be interesting as well from the...
Yes, I think that yes, I think that, in fact, because imitation is in some sense a best response. It's an halfway between a best response and a pure copying, right? And it's exactly right. It depends on which is why there is this. It's a very nice question, and in fact, I could go on for a long time. I wish I could be able to model this as opposed to just talk about this. But for example, there's this whole literature that is fashioned about institutions, as if institutions come out from the sky. They are some God-given thing. Institutions are just another piece of technology. A good institution, in the sense of a good rule, governing how the seven of us interact, is our own decision. It's a technology. Exactly like the camera and right? We pick it. And it's right, the way we interact, it's, for example, my decision. I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm saying, we spend some time, first you read, then you ask questions, then I do, right? It's an institution. It's a way of, a rule for interaction. May be right, may be wrong. May work well, it may work poorly. But it creates incentive. So one thing I've observed, for example, over here, is that I tend to tell students, do this. To graduate student, do this homework, read the paper, right? But I don't like, it's partly because that way saves me time. I don't like to go around, test continuously and punish or give, grades. And their imitation becomes relevant. If some student in the class does it, the other do it too. But if by chance, people tend not to do it, then nobody does it, right? I just observed this year. I had a class in some other place in which I assigned exactly the same order I assigned to you. They didn't do it. They imitated each other. They talked to each other, they imitated each other, they chose. Right? And so, yes. And I think imitating the bad example or imitating the good example often depends on social norms that are accepted, or, and this is actually a theory I tend to share more, what the elites like to impose. Because one of the problems of many of our modeling is that we pretend that there is always an agent and they're all identical. But it's never true. There was never an agent. I mean, even in the old tribe, in the old gang of hunter-gatherers, it's not true that they were all equal. Two guys were very strong. The other were women and children, and the two guys beat the shit out of everybody. They were the bosses. So they were the elite. They decided what were the good rules, what were the bad rules. They would reward certain behaviors and punish others. And this is true everywhere. Right? So if cheating and stealing and lying is accepted by the elites, then the incentive is to imitate the bad guys. If cooperating and abiding by the rule and innovating and working hard is compensated and rewarded by the elite, then people will imitate. So I think elites play a big role, and they always exist. I have never seen a society without elites. Now we're going into politics, but it's more serious politics. That's why this nonsense going on is complete nonsense, and it's going to lead to aberration for sure. Because it's some idiotic ideology in which the elite disappears, in which everything is doxa, everything is an opinion. And it doesn't work that way, because actually what it does is to make a very level field, and then one or two, three, smarter or more okay, let's not say it, people take advantage by fooling the rest, right? So yes, I think there's a lot of spreading that goes through that, which is the example we had before, only that's not a model, right? No middle equilibrium, either everybody behaves properly or everybody behaves poorly. And in part, economic development has to do with that. People start working, and working hard gets rewarded, then everybody works hard. If people don't start working, and not working gets rewarded as well, then why making an effort? I think the history of certain regions of Italy can easily be written along those lines. Right? There are regions that were equally poor at a certain point in time, some developed and some did not, and it's quite clear that the socio-political system and the elite rewarded the hard work in one case, and they got imitated, and rewarded the doing nothing and being smart in the other, and they got imitated.
But in the literature, do you think it's a properly treated topic? Because to my knowledge,
no, there's not much.
Because to my knowledge, at least they used to model and to treat the positive aspect of imitation, as you said, but the negative is a little.
I don't even know if they treated the positive aspect. The only literature that does that is this literature on social capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as I told Luigi many times, Guizo, who's in fact the one that pushes more, and Luigi is very good. Social capital is not a given. It's a social capital. It's an interesting notion, but in my opinion, it has a limit. It assumes that everybody's equal. Social capital is the thing that the elites create. You see what I mean? If you go to the root of that literature, which is this book by this research in the late 80s, early 90s by this American sociologist, you know the story, right? What's his name? Putnam, I think. Yeah. And it's very interesting, the story of that thing, right? Because it starts out, so Putnam gets involved by Italian researchers in, he's famous, he's at Harvard, I think, and so on. And some Italian people doing regional stuff says, oh, look, they introduced the regions in Italy in the 70s. And there is all this local administration that we can collect and try to study how they actually work. So the initial project is meant to study how this decentralized administrative mechanism works across Italy. Okay, and they start collecting data about that. And it's how as they collect data that they realize that certain measures of social behavior are extremely different. And that there is a very clear gradient, from south to north, that comes out in the data. Fines, compliance, all kind of things, respecting the building code, blah, blah, blah. And it's then that they say, wait a second, this goes beyond the region A being administered different from region B, from region C, and it seems to be following a gradient that has historical roots, and then, I don't know how deep that theory is, but it's clear that there is a part of explanation that is correct there. This is, there are areas of the country where there was a civic culture that was established, and so once you decentralized administration, the communes, the provinces where that civic culture was established started to behave in a virtuous way. There was another in which that culture was lacking, and decentralization meant producing a lot less of the public goods. But so that they call that social capital. But if you go back, right, you have to ask, where does it come from? So let me invite you, if you have time, if you're interested, because there is a beautiful book. I thought it's gigantic. It's almost 1,000 pages, by actually a distinguished Venetian historian that I think is now dead, but was alive in my times, and I ended up knowing because he was also a leftist, Marino Berengo. Marino Berengo was professor of history here. Yeah, Le Città d'Europa, the cities of, I don't know if it is translated in languages other than it. It's a huge book. L'Europa delle città, I think it's the correct title. It's very long, and it's an extremely, it's one of these classical guys, that these gigantic erudition, citing thousands of books and data and archives. So, but one thing it has that is in the center of the book is how the city elite, the local elite evolves, and the different incentive and the different ways in which behaviors get rewarded, and how this whole thing of having or not having the social capital, feeling or not feeling a citizen, treating or not treating your public space as your own property or as something to disparage, it's not exogenous. It's not some social capital that they have in Parma and they don't have in Catanzaro. They have it in Bordeaux and they don't have it in Cadiz, okay? Well, it evolves from the way those cities were ruled, from sometimes by chance, by the way in which the conflict between the emperor or the king or the duke and the local association of artisans or lawyers or notaries ended, if one won and the other lost, or vice versa, right? And so power got distributed and certain behaviors got rewarded because X won, and certain other behaviors got rewarded because Y won. So history matters, but it doesn't come from the sky. It always comes from the fact that elites at any point in time shape the incentive that the population at large have in behaving. Yes, I think, I mean, this is very ambitious the way I'm describing it, but I think it would be interesting to take some case studies. Yeah, Bordeaux versus Cadiz, or I don't know, Antwerp versus Cadiz. Or asking the question, why not Seville? This is a question I asked long ago. He got all upset to Daron. Daron writes too much, should think more and write less. I said, Daron, this whole crap about the Industrial Revolution happened because the trading cities of the